In the fall of 2007, Meredith Kercher, a 21-year-old British exchange student, arrived in Perugia, Italy to study for the year. She lived with 3 other roommates, including Amanda Knox, a fellow American student, in a charming flat in a quiet part of the city. Meredith, known for her kind and outgoing nature, was enjoying her time in Italy and had begun to make a life for herself in the picturesque city. However, November 1, 2007, would mark the beginning of a horrific and tragic ordeal for Meredith and her loved ones. On that fateful evening, Meredith's roommates had gone out, leaving her alone in the apartment. Later that night, Meredith's body was discovered by one of her roommates, Philomena Romanelli, who had returned to the apartment. Philomena was horrified to find Meredith's lifeless body on the floor of her bedroom, partially covered by a duvet. Meredith had been brutally stabbed multiple times in a violent and frenzied attack. Her throat had been slashed, and there were signs of sexual assault. The scene was one of chaos and terror, and it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary crime. The authorities in Perugia launched a thorough investigation. The police initially suspected that the crime may have been committed by a stranger, possibly a burglary gone wrong. However, as the investigation unfolded, the focus quickly turned to Meredith's roommates, particularly Amanda Knox. Amanda, who had been living in the apartment with Meredith, was arrested and charged with murder, along with her then-boyfriend, Raffaele Solicito. The two were said to have been involved in the crime, allegedly acting together in a vicious attack that led to Meredith's death. The investigation into the murder soon revealed that there was more to the story than initially suspected. Evidence was gathered from the apartment and blood was found in various locations. While police did not have conclusive proof linking Knox and Solicito to the crime, their behavior during the investigation raised suspicion. Amanda and Raphael gave conflicting statements and their alibis were shaky, leading police to believe they were involved. They were accused of killing Meredith during a botched sexual assault and later attempting to cover it up. The fact that they were in the apartment at the time of the crime, and their odd reactions to the investigation, made them prime suspects. In 2009, the trial against Amanda Knox and Raffaele Solicito began. The prosecution alleged that the pair had attacked Meredith in a fit of rage, and that the motive was a mix of sexual violence and jealousy. The case against the two was largely circumstantial, based on forensic evidence and inconsistent testimony. One of the key pieces of evidence used against Knox and Solicito was a knife found in Raphael's apartment, which was allegedly similar to the one used in the murder. Additionally, Amanda's DNA was found on Meredith's blood-stained bra. However, the defense argued that the evidence was contaminated and unreliable. In 2009, after a highly publicized trial, Amanda Knox and Raffaele Solicito were found guilty of Meredith Kercher's murder and sentenced to 26 years in prison for Amanda and 25 years for Raphael. This conviction shocked the world and led to widespread controversy. Many believe the case was filled with errors, including improper handling of evidence and questionable forensic practices. Additionally, there were conflicting reports from the police and prosecutors, and much of the case seemed to be built on circumstantial evidence rather than concrete facts. In 2011, Knox and Solicito's defense team appealed the verdict, and the case took a stunning turn. New evidence came to light that cast doubt on the initial convictions. The defense team argued that DNA evidence had been mishandled, and that there were issues with how crime scene photos had been taken. After a lengthy appeal, Amanda Knox was acquitted in 2011, and her conviction was overturned. Raffaele Solicito was also freed. The case gained global attention, as Knox and Solicito's acquittal was seen as a victory for justice. However, the true perpetrator of the crime still remained unknown. But in 2013, a court in Italy decided to reinstate the murder convictions for both Amanda and Raphael, citing a lack of closure and inconsistent evidence. The legal process continued to drag on, with the case never fully being resolved. In 2015, the Italian Supreme Court finally issued a final ruling that fully acquitted Amanda Knox and Raffaele Solicito. The court ruled that there was insufficient evidence to convict them, and that the investigation had been flawed from the beginning. The case was officially closed and Amanda Knox was allowed to return to the United States, where she resumed her life. Raffaele Solicito too returned to Italy, but his reputation was forever tarnished. As the case progressed, a new suspect, Rudy Gued, emerged. Gued, a Ivory Coast native, had been in the apartment at the time of Meredith's murder and was convicted of her death in 2008. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison after DNA evidence linked him to the crime scene. Gued's involvement in the murder was clear. He was caught on CCTV footage entering the apartment, and his DNA was found on Meredith's body. However, the question of whether he acted alone or had help remained unresolved. In the end, while Rudy Gued was found guilty and his involvement in the crime was solidified, the question of who else, if anyone, was involved in Meredith's brutal death remains unclear. The wrongful conviction of Amanda Knox and Raffaele Solicito remains a dark chapter in this tragic case, where the true perpetrator was convicted but others were wrongfully accused.